Oh, okay.
All right, now it's live.
Right on. Cool. Hi, everybody. We're just hopping on for a second because I had a question about tensions, and I thought it would be helpful to just talk about it live in case it's helpful to anyone else. Um, yeah. So, for those of you who don't know, I've been thinking about tensions the way Holacracy thinks about tensions. Which my name's Ruth, by the way. Sorry, I introduced myself. This is Chris. You probably know Chris because you follow him on Substack. Chris and I work together. What was I going to say? Oh, the way Holacracy thinks about tensions being the gap between, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the gap between what is and your felt sense of what could be.
Yeah.
Would you say that's
Yeah, it's great.
okay? Cool. So
Exactly
I've
right.
been thinking about this in terms of like it's starting to like bleed over into everyday life, like my viewing things as like tensions. Like I'm talking to my sibling and they have a tension, and like they wouldn't articulate it as a tension, but I can tell like there's a tension. Um, So I was thinking about the difference between processing attention in a governance setting where you're like changing the actual structure of the organization and in a tactical meeting. And my understanding is in a governance meeting, you're kind of integrating everyone's tensions into the proposal. Like if someone is that accurate? Would you?
I wouldn't think of it that way. No, do you want me to comment on that, or is that just
Yes. No
context?
comment on that. Go first.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, I think of it like each agenda item is one tension. That's true of both meetings, but each agenda item is a tension. So in a governance meeting, someone's bringing up attention to process because of the kinds of solutions that are required, changes to governance. Uh, in order to resolve their tension, we need the consent of the membership to make a change to the actual binding expectations of the circle, right? So again, if it's not a governance change that they need, well, then that sometimes gets identified through the process. And but when that realization happens, we say, okay, well then it doesn't, it's no longer a governance item. Let's move on to the next thing. So kind of by definition, you're trying to process one tension. And so I don't think of it as like we're trying to kind of integrate everyone's or trying to get everyone's involvement. It's more about we're actually trying to just still resolve that one tension. It just so happens because of the kinds of solutions that we need the consent of everyone there to do that, which means we then have this objection surfacing process, right? Does anyone have objections? And you go one by one, right? And then if there are objections and there's some there's a lot of like filters embedded to assure that we're only integrating tensions from those that have valid objections to that specific proposal.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so then I'm thinking about like in a tactical situation. So say, because in a tactical situation, the goal is to get the person who has the tension what they need. That's it, right? When you're processing
Yeah.
out tension.
Yeah.
So here's where I was kind of getting stuck, and maybe I'm thinking too hard about it and it would just make more sense in practice. But like, say I had a tension and what I needed was something from you.
Yeah.
And I'm like going all around. Okay, I'm just going to spit it all out. It's going to be a mess. So say I needed something from you, but you giving me that thing would then cause attention for you.
Yeah.
So,
Happens for sure.
so then how do we resolve because I'm thinking like what we do is we process those tensions separately. Like if you have a tension, then it would get processed separately. But you saying yes is the thing that creates the tension. So you don't have to say yes. So like, how do you? That's do you see what I'm saying? Like, so what if
I think
I
so.
see the only path is like I need you to do this thing, and you're like I can't do that thing because it brings up this other tension for me? Then it seems like we would want to process your tension to help me resolve my tension. But like then it
Yeah.
feels like we're starting to get messy again. So that's where
No,
I was
yeah,
like,
for sure. Yeah, I mean, we can think of like a concrete example, like, you
please.
want me to send you something. Can you send me that draft that you're working on or whatever? And I'm kind of like, yeah, like I could, but it's not like to the point that it's really going to be that usable for the thing that you've expressed until I get this other thing from somebody else that I'm actually waiting on to get. Let's imagine that scenario.
Okay.
So if you're in that meeting and I'm facilitating it. Well, I guess I can't be multiple characters in this scenario. The facilitator, right? identifies this. We're on your agenda item, right? Your request is to get that kind of sent. And then I start saying what I just said about like, well, I can, but not until I get this other thing from somebody else, which reminds me of this, right? The facilitator they would probably just try to kind of keep it clear, like, okay, so are you saying you will be able to send it, but not until you get this thing back, right? And then might check back with you, Ruth, and that might resolve it. You might be like, oh, okay, cool, right? Now that I have that information, right, that's all I needed. This is where it's difficult to kind of just make objective claims outside of a real scenario because it comes
Right,
down to like,
right,
I don't know, but would that solve it? But let's say it doesn't, and then say no, I really need that by this Friday or something, right? I might go back to like, well, right, but I've got this tension. I can't really. Well, it's like, well, could you knowing that, could you still send that version of the document? Now, Ruth, it's missing these pieces. Would that still resolve it? Again, you might be like, yes, or you might be no. So the key is kind of like, does the agenda item owner, this is why keeping these things grounded in an attention by attention or agenda item owner is so key, because the facilitator doesn't need to know or figure out whether or not this is one agenda item or two. You and I, or an analyst, a third party, right? Like you're saying, in these scenarios in a tactical, right? Just objectively, how does that get worked out, right? Like we're trying to figure out a heuristic or a rule of thumb or some way to know. Well, the way you know is you ask the agenda item owner, is this still part of your attention, right?
Oh,
Because they're in charge. It's their attention. So you don't need to know, right? What you need to know is that they're the ones that get to decide within some constraints of, like you might say, well, we've only got 5 minutes left, or, right, I've
right,
allocated, a facilitator might, has the authority to say something like that. But in the messiness of figuring things out, right, as long as the facilitator is coming back to you as that agenda item owner and saying, is this still helping you? Does this fit? Is this a part of your attention? And in practice, I would say a good portion of the time, it doesn't, as a third party, it doesn't really sound like it's actually part of their original tension to me, but they still say that it is. And you know what? It's fine. It works out, right? Like, what's the big deal,
right,
right? Because the key thing is they think that it is. So
right.
who am I? I mean, right? I could be right. I could be wrong as the analyst, but it doesn't really matter. It's about that person getting their agenda item resolved as much as they can within the realistic constraints of the time allocated.
So, like, part of resolving that tension could be, like, if I'm asking you for that document and you're saying, "No, I can't because this other person," it could be if that other person's there, you saying to that other person, "Hey, can you get that thing to me?" Like, that could still be part, even though it's sort of your tension, it's part of my tension because it's what. Okay, that's
Exactly.
super helpful because I've been like, and I can also see why it's helpful to ground it in actual tension, but I was, like, spinning in my head this morning
Yeah.
lying in bed thinking about this. I'm like, how do you, like,
No, you're
tease apart when we're,
right.
like, in another tension realm, and I don't wanna, like, get it all muddied because I know that's what often kills meetings is, like, 17 tensions trying to be processed at the
Right.
same time.
Yeah, and I think you're right to bring up the question because again, there is an answer objectively or structurally or something, which is like you go to the agenda item owner. Like
Right,
that is the answer for navigating the complexities of that. And as long as this is where it's like the facilitator skill and the participant skill really can kind of like blend together or merge or overlap or compete or something. Like there are strange dynamics there
yeah,
where like ideally a very affluent participant will lean into their agenda item in that way, right? Like they'll grab the reins. Hey, this is my agenda item, right? Like I want to hear from you. I don't want no, that's not helpful. I want to go back, right? Like you drive the bus. It's your bus. We're all here for that. The facilitator, in a way, is just there to kind of back them up and help if they aren't doing that. And it's quite rare that people do that, but that's unfortunate. This is why I say the dynamics are weird, is because the facilitator is in some ways trying to offset or account for the lack of the agenda item owner being super clear and direct about what they need and how other people can help them.
right.
And in the process of doing that, they can almost create almost like an enabling condition where everyone just starts to rely on the facilitator to do it because it seems like that's what they're supposed to be doing. which is like,
Oh,
well,
that has
right.
definitely happened in meetings I have facilitated.
Yeah, you're
Okay.
doing it because the other person's not doing it, not
Right,
because it's the job of the facilitator. It's actually not at all the job of the facilitator, right? If anything, it's the job of like a facilitator, holacracy coach, kind of thing. But a facilitator technically doesn't care.
so the facilitator's job is more to be like, "Okay, it's your turn." Like,
Yeah,
we're
how much time we have? Yeah, to do some of that, and then better and worse skill levels. But right, if you just
right,
look at the definition of it, and having developed like the courses for Holacracy One and on like Holacracy 101 and facilitator fundamentals and all these things, some of the key distinctions that were helpful for me, I was able to articulate, and that's kind of one of them. Of like most of the time when people go through holacracy training and are learning it early on, what they're actually kind of getting is kind of this hybrid facilitator coach thing.
right.
And it's important to just that makes sense. There are reasons why that happens, but to recognize that there is also a distinction that you can make, and that's helpful to remember too.
That is helpful. Well, and then I'm mapping it on in my head because one of the things I've noticed is in my, like, day-to-day relationships that are outside of any kind of holacracy context, when we're dealing with any kind of conflict, I often notice, like, "Oh my god, it'd be so helpful if we, like, clearly delineated tensions," because it starts to get so messy so fast, and this idea of, like, I'm owning my process of getting my tension resolved and being able to interrupt and be like, "Okay, wait, hang on. Can we just, like can we finish talking about this thing first, and then we'll get to, like, I wanna get to yours," but we have no practice, like, most people have no practice of that awareness, like, it feels like I'm shutting you down. I'm like, "I'm not, I promise, we'll get to you next." Like,
Well, right. And that's what that like a tactical meeting, its architecture is set up to make that at least easier to identify. It is true
right,
that that person has an opportunity to add their own item and all that kind of stuff in day to day life. You just have to. This is what I think it's fun to think about how distillable these elements are outside of holacracy into just a normal conversation, right? Because once you understand the principles, it's like, yeah, it shows up differently, but you kind of have at least for me, right? I have almost like a checklist in my mind of like, well, what are the conditions that need to be satisfied? So in the tactical meeting, right? Basically, like there's consent through multiple steps to like, you can, the being at the meeting is voluntary, right? You're not required to be at the meeting. Being in roles is voluntary, like you're not put into a role against your will, right? There's so many places in which once we're in the situation where we've got an elected facilitator by the membership, like, right, all of these things to kind of help establish a certain amount of legitimacy to the expectations. That's why the agenda item owner can be like, nah, I don't want to hear from you. And the participant who gets told that, as I've been that person, hopefully has this a similar experience of like, oh, thank God, right? Because it's so relieving to like know, right? Like you're to feel like someone's taking care of their own need here.
right,
I know I've got nothing but pathways for my own needs. I was literally just trying to help you. It was coming from that place. So for you being like, no, 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 that would be distracting. I don't want to hear that. I'm like, sweet. I'm only more motivated to keep wanting to help because I know, right, that they're owning their own stuff. So what's distillable from that? Uh, just basically kind of trying to get consent to do a similar thing, right? Owning one's experience. I'm feeling this. This is my tension. I'm trying to solve. This isn't about or what you're doing, right? If it is, it's about my tension with what it is that you're doing, right? You're
right,
just living your life. Like I am feeling some tension related to what you're doing, and so I want to explore this or whatever. Are you up for that? Can we do like a little relational thing? There are these little ways to essentially do a kind of like second order move to say, well, let's first kind of try to establish the context that we're in. It's going to be my turn to talk about my thing.
right,
And without all the other architecture and all the other stages and levels of consent and legitimacy building up to something that happens like in a holacracy tactical meeting, then yeah, you're not, it's more flimsy, right? Like, you can't lean on, like, that's a situation where you wouldn't want to be like, no, I don't want to hear that anymore. Let's move on to this, right? It's like, well, they just consented to kind of give you some space, but back to but there's not necessarily any guarantee that they're going to get that space,
Right.
right? So it's flimsy. So get consent, maybe clarify. And after I do my thing, right? Do you want to turn? We can do it that way. Where after I share it, I would like to check in with you to see how that went. And let's take a few minutes, and I'll just focus all on your side of it, right? That might help them be able to kind of enter into just a helping of you space. But all of that, this is what's cool. As I describe it, doesn't that sound at least possible?
Yeah.
Right? It's not saying it's going to be comfortable, but it's yeah, those are the elements. And then all we need to do is find the ways to satisfy those elements. And yeah, it's a little awkward. It's, requires some new terminology, some new language, some new energy that has to be brought in. But, it's a lot of what work in different, nonviolent communication, meta relating, these different approaches have tried to kind of help identify. Here's how to go about making requests and things like that in a similar sort of way, identifying your needs and things like that. So all of these things are kind of aligned, but using the structural view, which is often missing, right? Is holacracy provides us a good kind of bin of raw material, right? To kind of analyze and recognize, oh, that's how you would do that if you didn't have, that infrastructure.
Right. Well, and like we've talked a lot about how if you don't have a pathway to address what's going on internally to you, like the
Right.
tensions you're feeling, then it's very easy to stop feeling the tensions or to shove them down and pretend like you don't have them because what's the point? It becomes this very hopeless. So I'm
Mhm.
noticing in my own life that the more you and I work together, the more I explore holacracy, the easier it is in my personal life to
Yeah.
address things that are not working because I'm more confident, oh, I can see a pathway to resolve this. And even if the other person can't, I'm aware of this kind of dynamic of okay, I know how to. And one of the things, oh, so good, so many little gems. One of the things you have a video about feedback, the
Hmm.
requirement to track about
Oh yeah.
how part of
Let's
why
take
we
a look.
feedback bomb each other and just drop feedback when the other person's not expecting and it's not a good time is because we're afraid we'll forget because we're not keeping track of the things we want to say to someone else. And I've started doing that. You and I do that in our meetings. As you're talking, I'm like, oh, that reminds me of a thing. And then I just put it in the chat and add it to the agenda. And I've started doing that. I have a little notepad I keep with me all the time. And when I'm talking on the phone to a friend and I notice that happened, I'm like, this would be a moment I would interrupt and I would hijack. And I'm like, just write it down. And then when they're done, I can bring up the thing. But I feel the same in conflict.
Yep.
If you bring that up as a structure of hey, if something comes up for you while I'm talking that you want to address, let's have a thing and you can just write it down and we'll come back to it next. I don't want to lose the things that you're
Exactly. I love that. I think that's I mean, so many different elements of that are important to underline, but the one that I really like right there is another way of yeah, maybe as a part of setting that up, you say, right? And you feel free to have your phone out or here's a notepad, right? Or something. And yeah, since it's going to be my turn to focus on my thing. And I really appreciate, and again, we could set time limits, right? So let's do 5 minutes, 10 minutes or something. All these different ways to kind of make it as clear as possible to that other person who doesn't carry all these distinctions, right? This is what I think
right,
is so powerful. You were building all, or the idea of the tracking, providing the solution space around things. It's another kind of form of second order kind of solutions, right? By having that space, you can jot things down, and then you're not as motivated to interject on something. Um, Recognizing all of that stuff then allows you, even without the other person, this is what's for me so interesting. It definitely is easier if both people have it,
right,
right? But even if the other person doesn't, just literally anybody in your personal life who doesn't have all these distinctions, right? If you know what you're looking for and you've got options about how to achieve them, right? You can provide all of that stuff that's literally external from your own head and theirs that they can relate to and interpret and understand and agree to, or not, or you negotiate something else, which gives you that sense of well, that all sounds like I could do that.
uh-huh,
That all makes sense to me that they would be able to consider that and know exactly what I'm asking of them to consider. And then it seems likely that they would accept that. And then, yeah, you find, sure enough, here I am in this situation I didn't think would be possible, essentially. Right. But now I'm in a situation with somebody where I'm able to process my tension or be heard and understood or look for a resolution together was somebody who I was, attributing some sort of like personality flaw or some sort of deeper issue that we really are contending with, all of which actually still may be true, right? But
Right.
by distilling it down to like these structural elements, set a timer, get clear consent to that context. Um, provide them a, or incentivize, encourage them to have something, pad of paper, some place to write down things that might occur to them that they want to explore, that you're going to give them time for later, to help make it clear to them this is not just about you, you know trying to fix my problem for me or something like that.
Right.
This is a shared kind of thing. Um, yeah, that's a great one. I love that.
I feel like you could also do that in reverse. Like if they come to you with something they want to address, you could be like, okay, give me 1 second. I just need to set myself up so that I can fully listen. So, like, I need a piece of paper. So, if I have any thoughts, I can jot them down. So, you don't think I'm like just dinking around on my phone while you're
Exactly what
talking, like,
happens. Yeah.
whatever the thing is. Like, uh huh.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens. I've had that happen. Yeah, where I do it and then say like, "Oh, I need to make sure that they know what I'm doing here." Right?
Right.
And clarify, "Oh, I just want to write this down because I want to ask you about this later, but I'm with you." And then I would in that moment try to then repeat what I think I'm hearing from them so that they know I'm not just saying that. Like I actually literally am tracking, you know, what they're saying. Yeah.
That's very cool. That's helpful. The concept of like, the I had not drawn that distinction in an actual tactical meeting of like the tension holder being the one who's responsible for getting their need met. Like, because I've never been officially trained and I've always bootstrapped holacracy and I've never like it's always fallen more and then nobody knows what they're doing. Like nobody is familiar with how to process tensions this way, then I'm almost always the facilitator. So I've always
Right.
been the one holding the but that makes so much
Well,
more
this is the
sense.
big gap. This is the big gap I sense too, right? It's like if you have I had the benefit of being in Holacracy One and so like the experts, like the mothership of this kind of practice to see how it's done. How are certain things done? Um recognize and then there's the training and then there's like the coaching and stuff that happened. But if you weren't able to see that, then how would like you just need some exemplars, some role models sometimes and be like,
Right.
oh, that's how you would go about saying that or doing that. And once you see it, it doesn't seem all that strange. Um, but one is like the opportunity to even kind of see it. And two, if you do see it, to kind of recognize it for what it is, right? It gets a bit back to like a really good facilitator can actually carry a lot of this burden. The unfortunate part of that is that doesn't necessarily mean anyone recognizes what's happening
Right.
by virtue of them carrying all that. So as I'm a coach or facilitator, right, I would do things like I'd bring up my own agenda item to. So someone's like looking for this would be a classic example that took me a while to figure out, but it seemed to always work well once I tried it, which was instead of kind of interjecting and basically kind of stop someone from processing their agenda item in a way that to me felt like didn't really fit kind of like the rules the best, right? Like they want to, I don't know, they're trying to set an expectation, right? And they say, no, 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 I'm not trying to set an expectation. I'm just want every time they do this, I just want them to make sure they give me a heads up. And I'm like, uh, right. But what I learned to do, the early coaches, facilitators would make the mistake of like, basically, I would say kind of fighting that battle. They try to fight that battle there. But as a consequence of fighting that battle, they're teaching a bigger, worser lesson, which is this is not really your space to get your tension solved. This is really more about learning holacracy. It's really more about the tensions that I feel as a coach, as the power holder in this scenario. I really get the right to stop you from doing what you want for my own needs. Cool? Right? Like that's
Right.
actually what is actually happening. Recognizing that allowed me to say, I mean, do my job, right? My job as this, being paid to be, so to try to help. But that's the key, to help and to help that person. And that the bigger lesson to teach is that it is their space to get their tension solved, right? And that therefore is a higher priority. Meaning, if they say they're not setting an expectation, and I think they are, and the other person's like, "Yeah, no problem, I'll do that," and I'm like, "Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, this should be in gut," right? Like, Chris, right? This is not actually not a problem. All you have to do, right, is have them solve that agenda, and then I just add my own agenda item, right? Like, what isn't that so much? Doesn't that actually teach the bigger point here? And it gives the added benefit. It gives me an opportunity to role model good agenda stewardship. All right, this is what I need. Coming from my role as facilitator, this thing happened, right? And it sounded to me like you were blah, blah, blah. You said that you weren't. I want to kind of dig in on this because my suggestion, but then it's my agenda item.
That's amazing. I love that. I've definitely done the first thing where
Of
I'm
course,
like,
everybody
jump in.
does.
Yeah,
Yeah, everybody does.
but that makes
That's how we
perfect
learn
sense.
it. Yeah, that's kind of how we
Right,
learn to do it. I had the benefit of, not only doing but also like doing all the assessments, tactical and governance, playing a novice and having been facilitated over years and years, and to
right.
kind of finally make some of those distinctions to realize, oh, that's a better way of doing it, which then leads to some of the work that you and I are doing now, which is like, and actually it gets even cooler because that kind of stuff is even, again, distillable. You don't actually even need Holacracy has some really great stuff. It has really good versions of things, but you don't need all of that system to do some of this stuff.
Well, yes, I know because I constantly am mapping it onto my. Once you start to like live and breathe some of these things, like it's hard not to live and breathe them everywhere. Like I start to
Everywhere,
see
right?
it in all my, and then I'm asking myself, like, how do I do this? What does this look like with a romantic partner or with a sibling or with like a kid or like whatever? Like it looks different depending on the relationship and um,
Yeah,
but it's cool. That also made me think when you said once you see it, I'm like, when I was learning Holacracy, I was like searching everywhere for, I just want to see a tactical meeting, like on
yeah,
YouTube.
no,
I'm like, and it would be amazing to see a tactical meeting with like a voiceover, like breaking, like pausing, being like, okay, right here, here's what's going on. Cause I'm like, I agree. Like, you have to, if you haven't seen it, you don't know what is, it's like, cause I imagine from like working with you and starting to like actually get it more, it's like watching professional sports players. Like, there's a level of
yeah,
skill
yeah,
that is involved in being able to have these kinds of conversations that if you don't even know it exists, then I don't know.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit. Yeah, totally. That resonates. Yeah, yeah, resonates a lot.
Anyway, cool. This was great. I don't know,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's fun.
that that resolves my tension of wanting to
Ah,
understand tensions better. Is there
yeah,
anything else you wanna
yeah,
add?
that was a good one. No, that was good. I'm glad you decided. We were just talking kind of off the Substack live about um, doing one of these to explore that. Ruth had some questions about tensions, and I was like, yeah. Oh, and I was saying like I was kind of low energy and like not really feeling it. And you're like, well, something that does give you energy is answering these kinds of questions. So I think you're right, and I think it works, and it was fun. I'm glad we did it.
Cool. Thanks, guys, for coming, and I hope that was helpful, and we're gonna try to do this more often whenever we're just
Yeah,
discussing interesting things. Just pop on impromptu and do it live. Hopefully, it makes a
yeah,
difference.
yeah, exactly. Cool.
See you
Thanks,
guys
everyone.
next time. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.